Hi everybody, and welcome to our video on how to program your Fleck 5600 SXT digital water softener control valve. So, as you know, on your screen you have a couple of things. First is your programmed time of day. You have a little water faucet symbol here, and then you'll see another number that pops up every few seconds. That is your number of gallons of soft water you have to use in the home before the system needs to regenerate. So, in order to get into the master programming mode, we have to set the time of day to a specific time of day to get in there. And that specific time of day is 12:01 p.m. So get your time moving to 12:01 p.m. You can get your time to start moving by holding either the up or the down arrow button. Just hold either one and the time will start moving in that direction. I need to go down to get to 12:01 p.m. As you saw there, my time on the screen was 12:24 p.m. So I'm going to hold the down arrow button. And we're just going to move the time down until you see TD 12:01 p.m. Make sure to see that little PM symbol in the top right as if it's an AM. There won't be anything there, as you see there. Once we get into the PM, PM appears. So again, we're looking for TD 12:01 PM. Once you see that on your screen, be sure it doesn't roll over like mine just did. Then tap the cycle button to lock it in. And then hold the up and the down arrow buttons together at the same time and keep holding those two buttons down. After a couple of seconds, you should see DFGAL appear on the screen. Once you see that, that lets you know you are in the master programming mode. From this point, it's just a matter of advancing through each setting and making sure it's set correctly. This first setting happens to be set correctly, so go ahead and tap the cycle button, again the far left button, to advance to the next setting. For this next setting, you should see VTDF1 lowercase b. Tap the cycle button to advance to the next setting. For this CT setting, you should see capital F lowercase d. If you see that, great. Advance to the next setting by tapping the cycle button. You want to see NT with 3 dashes and a number 1. If you see that, good. Tap the cycle button to advance to the next setting. For this C setting, it is dependent on what size system you have. So if you have a 48,000 grain softener, which for example's purposes I will be using in this video, you will go ahead and set this number to 48. So again, this is dependent on the size of your system, and I'll put a little table here on the screen so you can reference with what size your system is. It is pretty straightforward though. If you have a 48,000 grain system, you would set this to 48. If you have a 64,000 grain system, you would set this to 64, 32,000 grains, 32, and so on and so forth. I'm sure you can see the pattern there. Again, for example's purposes, this softener right here is a 48,000 grain softener, so I'm setting this to 48. Once you have your capacity setting set correctly, tap the cycle button to advance to the next setting. This H setting is the hardness setting. You will set this to whatever your hardness of your water is in grains per gallon. It is also worth noting that you can add 5 for every part of iron that you have in your water. So let's say your water has 20 grains of hardness in it with no iron, so you would move this down to 20. And say your water was 20 grains hard, but you had 1 part of iron, you would move this up to 25. Now, let's say your water is 15 grains hard, but you have 2 parts of iron. You would also set this to 25. Again, for every part of iron you have in the water, you would add 5 to your hardness number. Another example is, say your water is 20 grains hard, but you have 2 parts of iron. You would set this to 30. So whenever you get the hardness value set correctly on your system to whatever it is, everyone is going to be different. Tap the cycle button to advance to the next setting. For this setting, you want to see RS in the top left and a lowercase rc in the center. If you see that, great. Advance to the next setting by tapping the cycle button. You should see RC 150. Leave that as is and advance to the next setting by tapping the cycle button. For this DO setting, what you set here is dependent on whether you are on city or well water. If you are on city water, you can keep this at 14. And if you are on well water, you need to move this number down to 7. So again, if you're on city water, DO 14. If you're on well water, DO 7. Once you have that set correctly for your specific scenario, advance to the next setting by tapping the cycle button. you should see RT 2 o'clock. Now this setting, you could set this to whatever you'd like. This is the regeneration time denoted by RT. This is the time of day that the system will regenerate. You ideally want to set this to a time where no one is using water in the home. As you can use water while the system is regenerating, it is just not treated or soft water. So ideally, again, a time where no one's using water or very minimal water. A good time like 2 o'clock in the morning when everyone's sleeping is a great time. So by default, that's what it's set to. In most cases, you can just leave that as is, but just know you can change this. Say you want this to regenerate at some other time. You would set this to whatever time you'd like. And once you have it set to the, whatever time you'd like, advance to the next setting by tapping the cycle button. You should see BW10. Leave that as is and advance to the next setting. You should see BD60. Again, leave that as is, advance to the next setting by tapping the cycle button. You should see RR10. That's perfect. Leave that as is and advance to the next setting by tapping the cycle button. Now for this BF setting, this is another one of those settings that is dependent on, it changes depending on what size of system you have. So I'll put another chart on the table here so you can figure out, depending on your size of system, what to set this to. Again, for my example here, I'm using a 48,000 grain softener, so I would set this to 10. Just off the top of my head, you would set this to 12 if you have a 64,000 grain system, and you would set this to 6 if you had a 32,000 grain system. Again, I have a 48,000 grain system, so if you're like me, you would set this to 10. Once you have this set correctly, advance to the next setting by tapping the cycle button. Now for this last setting here, this FM setting, this is your flow meter setting. You will set this depending on what meter assembly you have on your control valve. So if you bought a whole complete system from us, your 5600 SXT valve will have a paddle wheel meter equipped on it. And I will throw up some pictures here so you can see this is what a paddle wheel meter looks like. There's another option. It will be T0.7 if you have a turbine meter. And I'll put a picture of a turbine meter up here as well so you can see that. If you bought just a replacement control valve, a replacement 5600 SXT from us, those come equipped with turbine meters. But if you bought a complete system from us, those come equipped with paddle wheel meters. So if you have a paddle wheel meter, you will set this to P0.7. If you had a turbine meter, you would set this to T0.7. Each valve should come programmed correctly from the factory with which one it has on there. So again, you could use these pictures to reference. Most likely, you will have P0.7 here. This happens to be the last setting, so if you tap the cycle button one last time, you will go back to the time of day screen. And as you can see here, you have time of day, and then you'll see another number that pops up, which is your number of gallons of soft water you have to use in the home before the system needs to regenerate, and there it is. So at this point, once you have programmed the softener, you need to set the time of day back to your correct time of day. My correct time of day happens to be 12:30 here, so I'll get it to the correct time of day. Once you have the time of day set correctly, tap the cycle button to lock in your selection, and you're all good. You will notice that after you get done programming your system, the little water faucet symbol here on the left is flashing. That just means that a regeneration is going to occur at the next programmed regeneration time, which if you left it at 2 o'clock in the morning will be the next 2 o'clock in the morning. The reason it does this is to apply all the programming information that you just input into it. So it just kind of applies those settings. So don't be alarmed if you see that flashing. That is completely normal. So this has been how to program your Fleck 5600 SXT digital water softener control valve. If you have any questions, please do not hesitate to contact us, and thanks for watching.